Other audience questions? Okay, the next up to start the answer will be Jeff. Thanks.
Hi. I know that the City Council is not going to decide this oil issue. One thing that really disturbs me about this is that probably 51% of the citizens is going to impose their will on 49% of the citizens. And my worst fear is that 51% of the citizens will impose this oil project on 49% of the citizens. And good people like Gail here, who live near the proposed site, are going to have to deal with this. Now, I know the City Council doesn't decide this, but I think the City Council could do things, God forbid, if that happens, to minimize the impacts on people like Gail and the other citizens who live by this site and are going to lose property value and suffer the health risks. So I'd like to hear some maybe out-of-the-box ideas on what the City Council can do to minimize that. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I wanted to, if I can use my time to make a point here about, it was mentioned the TOT, the bed tax. There was a proposed ballot initiative that that would have gone on this election in November, which would have given you the authority to increase, or to increase by 2% the bed tax that we collect, and it was not passed by council. So you need to know that. To your question, I spoke to it earlier. Council will have a great impact in this. There's another component that's yet to be even articulated or even decided upon, and that is this negotiation process of the development plan that goes on the ballot. The City Council will be engaged in that process. That development plan will be the specifics of what they're going to do and will be the consideration of all of the information we've gathered to that point. So to answer your question, you want to be comfortable that you have people up there that are going to protect your interests, that have, you know, that have concerns about not only just the residents, but in terms of the health and the environment and all of the things and the quality of life issues that are all attached to this. So that's critical. So you need to, it may seem like a leap of faith, but at this point it's a question of make sure you have people up there that you know at the end of the day are going to be there to protect your interests because they're a fellow resident like you and homeowner, and they believe in this city or have a history of this city, and they're going to try to do the best they can because it is a negotiation process as I understand it. So you want negotiating the people who can, you know, who are going to represent you and your interests the best.
Thanks, Jeff. Carolyn?
Well, JD, I think that's a good question. We could do things such as do a carve-out for people who live within a certain radius of the oil drilling site. They are the people who are most impacted. We could decide, whatever the radius is, that we set aside X number of dollars or X percentage of the total dollars because those are the people that just took the most risk. We might decide that we underground everybody who lives within a certain radius. We might decide that we want to fix the sewer systems for all the people who are in this radius. We might decide that we are going to repave all their streets. We might do other things for those neighborhoods just to acknowledge the fact that they did take most of the risk. So, I mean, this whole thing is so unfortunate to me, I mean, when you think about it, but it actually makes sense logically because people who live on the other side who don't even see any of this, who aren't impacted, if you really think about the way the money is spent, isn't it equitable to say that the people who are right there deserve more?
Thanks, Carolyn. Amy?
Thanks, JD. I think that what you're looking for from the council is to be able to ask the right questions to all the issues that address everybody are fully and completely articulated in the reports that we all get to look at and evaluate. So when everybody's voting, they're voting based on all the information and all the accurate information. Obviously, as you know, one of the reports that will be prepared, that's currently being prepared, is the financial report. And one of the things that you want from people in the city council is to make sure that specific question is addressed in the financial reports, which is impact of property values and impact of property values of properties next to the oil well versus other properties. But I think on a grander scale, although I am concerned and I do see that the concerns of people that live next door to the oil wells, but this is a much bigger issue than people that live next door. You don't have to live next door to be concerned about the proposed oil well. This is not only a Hermosa Beach issue, this is a South Bay issue. This is a Santa Monica Bay issue. So even though there's things that were suggested here that you can look at and parcel different blocks and different areas, but I think the reports that you're going to be looking at during reviewing is going to hopefully give you the grand scheme of the impact to the entire city, to the entire South Bay. And what I want at the end of the day, I'm hoping at the end of the day, that people that live on 28th, 29th Street that are, probably as small as our city is probably a mile away from the oil well, are concerned about this oil drilling project as much as people that live right next door to it.
Thanks, Haney. Greg?
Thank you. Yeah, let me just say that for all of you in the audience that own property in Hermosa Beach, your value has already been affected. This discussion, this project has already affected the saleability of your home. Again, going to my real estate background. You remember that form you always fill out when you buy and sell a property? It's called a disclosure statement. You need to disclose this on any potential purchaser of your home. You need to tell them there's a potential for an oil well or 30 oil wells in your neighborhood. This is, like Hanny said, nobody's more than a mile away from this project. Money is not always the answer. I mean, it's nice that we're going to give money back to people that lost value, but money is not just, you can't just buy people out of their sense of community, their sense of home, their view, their livability in the neighborhood, the trucks driving by their house every day until when and if a pipeline is ever installed. What would be the mechanism to do that? Would we give them a tax increment? That's just, it just doesn't, and then who's going to say, well, because I live in the north end, I didn't get as big as a tax cut as I did the south end, and that's what Handy's talking about. This is the city. The city of Hermosa Beach is affected by this. It's the reverse of the complaint. Well, I moved in next to LAX, and now I'm going to complain about the noise. You guys didn't move in next to an oil field. You moved in to a beautiful community, and now they want to put the oil field in. So it's in reverse, and you do have a right to say no, and you do have a right to make sure it's safe and to keep the quality of life you enjoy today.
Thanks, Greg. Annette?
I agree. This town is 1.3 square miles, and saying you're going to repave my street, but you're not going to repave 30th Street. First of all, that's a nuts and bolts fundamental. We need to be repaving our streets for everybody, not just for people who are next to the oil site. I think that the city council could play a role in this process because we can ask the tough questions. We're going to be the ones that are going to look at the EIR and be able to point out to residents what wasn't looked at, and ask why wasn't this looked at. And I think that's something that the city council will need to do. It's really a process of being meticulous, going through it, something that I'm used to doing every day in my daily practice. The city council will have the power of the microphone to educate residents about all of the harms. For example, nobody's talking about the fact that in 2010, at the Huntington Beach facility, the same company that's doing the drilling here, there was an oil spill, but nobody's talking about that. I will investigate and bring all those facts to light so that our residents will be fully informed and can make a decision on this issue.
Thanks, Annette. John?
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty much all been said, but yes, I wish that we could do more individually for people if they were suffering from this, but there's little that we could carve out because, again, at some point you're going to say, well, it goes up to 6th Street, and the guy on 7th is saying, well, what about me? So there's no way I think they could achieve the equitability that we'd look at if we were trying to compensate. But in terms of asking the hard questions, getting the information, letting people know what it is that they actually consider, what the impacts will be, that is the job of this council. Something I didn't bring up earlier, but I think I should probably toss out there now, is talking about my method of getting facts out, waiting for all the information to come in and then making a decision. That's what I did with the McPherson Oil Project. I was here when that was going through, and it was my vote that killed the McPherson project, because when that last report came through, and it was a safety report, and it didn't give me the information that made me feel comfortable for our citizens. So at that point, I was willing to kill that project, despite the fact that we'd taken it all that way, because I couldn't be convinced that our citizens were safe. I will use that same process in evaluating the new project as it comes through. Now, also, I'd add, I certainly am not a realtor and don't pretend to be, but I think that the disclosure problem has been or the necessary disclosure has been in effect way back since the McPherson project. So if anybody was moving into the city, that project was still out there, and the realtors would have had to acknowledge that there is the potential of an oil project across the street.
And you can summarize, John?
And I think that disclosure has been there, and yet prices did continue. So they are what they are in Hermosa, and I think at any point we're still going to be one of the most desirable communities in the world to live in, but we want to make sure that it stays that way.
Thanks, John. Any more questions from the audience?